Thank you. Thank you. One more thing is, I am a friend of Uncle Charles as well. I've known him, I actually knew him by reputation, which could go either way, for many years before I met him in 2009. But we ran in the same circles, but we never managed to meet. And so a mutual friend of mine in England by the name of Rafe Heidel-Manku, who was a broadcaster on royal issues and royal matters for Canadian television in London, he suggested that we should meet, and so I had to go to London to be told, meet Charles since you live in the same city. And so we finally did in 2009, in October. And so I will always, he is not here, and I will always tease him about that. I'm here and he is not. So if any of you could tease him about that, please do. It's fun to tease Charles. It's so much fun to tease Charles. And he serves it right back. Well, my subject for today is basically it's on Dante. It's centered on Dante's Purgatorio. I actually titled it, "Here from the Dead, Let Poetry Arise," or Rise Up, Faith, Reason, and Poetry in Dante's Purgatorio. This was a lecture that I had given before to my class as part of a series on faith. And the director of the honors program at Houston Christian University asked me to do something on faith in Dante, right? And so I thought, well, I could, let's see, I wanted a catchy title, right? Just faith in Dante, it's kind of bland. So I settled for, when I read from the first canto of Purgatory, there's that line which basically, once Dante and Virgil are coming out of the nether regions of the damned, also known as hell, they are. They finally see the stars, and so in line 7, this is how it begins. To run its course through a smoother water, the small bark of my wit now hoists its sail, leaving that cruel sea behind. Now I shall sing the second kingdom. There where the soul of man is cleansed, made worthy to ascend to heaven. Here from the dead, let poetry arise. Now, why is poetry needing to rise? That's what one student asked me. Why does poetry need to, why does poetry need to be redeemed and rise from the dead, right? Well, good question. Excellent question. And this gets to I think to the question of why Dante uses Virgil to represent, among other things, the human intellect, the highest that the human intellect can achieve. Well, Virgil is great and all, but, couldn't Aristotle do for that, for that purpose, right? Aristotle, after all, was, what does St. Thomas Aquinas call Aristotle? The what? the philosopher, right? He calls him so why not Aristotle? And this is a question that comes up often when I lead classes on Dante as part of the Great Books curriculum that I teach in the Honors College at Houston Christian University. Why Virgil? And some students even joke about Dante being a quote, and some of the Americans here might get this, being a sort of Dante being a sort of Virgil fanboy, right? And I have to be quick to remind them that Virgil is considered the poet of poets in the Middle Ages, right? The popularity of the Aeneid is in the Middle Ages, and it's being copied and recopied, makes Virgil and Virgil also representing the empire, right? The body politic at its highest, and what human intellect can achieve, the kind of society that the human intellect can achieve with the four cardinal virtues, right? Of justice, temperance, wisdom, and what's the other one? Fortitude. Yes, courage, fortitude. We can't forget courage, right? But as Virgil himself says, those virtues were not enough to save him. He had those down right. He had those down packed, but that was not enough. It wasn't enough to save him. And so he becomes, par excellence, a representative of the empire, of the imperial ideal, of the matter of Rome. As Charles Coulomb likes to say, by the 6th century, many of the imperial institutions that had defined the Western Roman Empire had disintegrated. But the memory of Roman order was never forgotten. It remained. The Roman order, the memory of Roman order continues. And of course, it kind of takes on other iterations and incarnations, like the Carolingian Empire, and the precursor, of course, to the Holy Roman Empire. So the imperial ideal is always there. But more important than all of that, even for Dante, is poetry, right? So if Dante were thinking purely in a philosophical sense, then it would make sense to use Aristotle. His aim, however, is the redemption of the lyric voice, the poetic mind. He draws upon the lyric past, and to Virgil in particular, as representative of the Roman imperial ideal in order to draw attention to the irrationality of civil war and disorder that was tearing apart the body politic in the Italian city-states, and how that order can be salvaged through an act of grace. Virgil is the poet's poet par excellence for Dante, and the salvation of the city-states and the world lies in a restoration of the intellect through which poetry can once again flourish. Now, one good thing about this audience here is that unlike my evangelical Protestant students, I don't have to explain the concept of purgatory to you. So I had this whole thing about purgatory as a precursor, but I don't need to explain that to this audience. Purgatory for Dante is the beginning of that process where faith through a supernatural act of grace can redeem not only the soul and the intellect, but also poetry itself. Virgil represents not only the intellect, but the poetic intellect itself, and the Divine Comedy can be interpreted as, among other things, the salvation and restoration of poetry through that supernatural act of grace, which gives us the theological virtue of faith, thus imbuing us with the knowledge of God. Just as faith perfects reason, so faith also perfects the sublime product, that sublime product of the intellect, poetry. To appreciate this journey a little more deeply, let us briefly sojourn through the infernal regions first. The land of the damned. So the dies irae should be sounding in your minds right now. Day of wrath and so forth. And forgive me if I talk with my hands a lot. Any Italians around here? Anybody from Italy? We Cubans also talk with our hands, tend to talk with our hands, though we tend to do very emphatic sort of things. I had an uncle who his name was Bonifacio, and to make emphatic points, he would say something like, and for example, when he told his daughters, my cousins, that they could not date while they're in school. And to make the emphatic point, he would say, all right, anyway. Now, why anyway, I don't know. You could say all right. I mean, all right is reasonable, but anyway, for some reason, anyway was a good emphatic word. So, all right, and then, of course, with hand motion, anyway. So forgive me if I sort of follow suit here. Hell is the place where our heroes, Dante the Pilgrim, and of course you understand when I talk about, there are two Dantes. There's Dante the poet, the author, and Dante the Pilgrim, right? Dante and Virgil see the breakdown of human nature and of human relationships through sin. But we also see the breakdown of language. Joan Ferrante, professor of comparative literature at Columbia University, relates this breakdown in Basic Humanity and Language. In Paradiso, she says, Dante seems to be moving towards a kind of universal language, incorporating Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and French elements, as well as Italian words that he creates. In Inferno, on the other hand, language usually gets in the way of communication. There is little Latin in the Inferno, but there are lots of dialect words which emphasize the isolation and limited vision of the damned. And, of course, gibberish, which points to their inability to interact rationally. I think that in Inferno, Canto 7, Pluto is saying something like papi satane alepe, and people have ever wondered what does that even mean? Well, it means nothing. It's calling upon Satan, but it's gibberish. It's just a lot of gibberish. Even the souls that speak elegantly, like Francesca Farinata and Ulysses, attempt to deceive with their words, the worst abuse of speech. So says Professor Ferrante. All of this betokens, of course, the loss of the good of reason. In the lower regions of fraud and wrath, humanity loses its ability to communicate effectively, which evidences the loss of their highest faculty, which sets them apart from the animals. We should also step back and explore the process in which Dante the poet, with the help of important predecessors, turns around a common poetic art form popular in the late medieval era towards a more pure and lofty purpose, the courtly love poetic tradition. Most popular in Provence and the Provençal troubadours. Some of my students basically have picked up on some of this poetry, and they call it basically, what they pick up on is a lot of lust, a lot of lustful, because key to courtly love, the courtly love genre is the unrequited passion of the lover. His lady love must be someone he sees but does not know, and she must be of a higher social status than him, a situation where a situation where there was an impossibility of union. No union, no satiation of his burning passion. The 14th century composer Guillaume de Machaut, who composed the beautiful Notre Dame Mass, also wrote in the courtly love genre. He wrote a famous piece called Haro, I'm probably butchering this. Forgive me if I'm doing medieval French in a Cuban accent. Haro, le feu, help, fire, fire. And this captures the hopelessness of a lover engulfed in the fires of desire for his lady love, with whom he has no hope of ever uniting. Now, let me say that this is all part and parcel of Dante's attempt to redeem poetry. Okay, so this is kind of along those lines. But let me kind of quote this poem, which is also a song, in full to sort of illustrate some of its most salient features. It says, "Help, help, the fire of burning desire, which has never been so hot as love has kindled and sustained in my heart, and it has preserved the joy of hope, which should temper such burning desire. Alas, if the fire which thus burns it should survive, my heart will be entirely consumed, which from this fire is now blackened and stained, because it is genuine, loyal, and true, so much so that I expect that it will die before good love assures it of mercy by the virtue of certain hope." So basically, hope dies. There's no possibility here of any union. "For because of her alone, who endures much misfortune, pity, to which all beauty leads, is lacking. Suffering reigns and domination lies in wait. Disdain lives there, and loyalty plays the hypocrite, and love cares for neither her nor me. Joy hates it. My lady is harsh. And in order to increase my miserable misfortune, love, who is my chief, puts me in a despair which is so painful that all good is torn away, and in any case my body is so distorted, and I must die in spite of nature." And it continues. It continues. "Alas, where will comfort be found for me, who is worth not even death, when nothing can protect me except my beloved lady, who hears that in despair I simply cry because I love her more than any other, and memory in order to inflame the ardor of my unhappy desire shows me always the great goodness and her perfect true beauty, which make me doubly burn. Thus, without a heart and without hope, I cannot live for long, nor was the heart at all human, nor can it have long duration. Anybody ever felt like that? Yeah, I'm seeing a few heads go, yep, that's accurate. Anybody who's been in love and the love is not reciprocated can relate to this poem. But again, this is the thing about courtly love poetry. It highlights the passion and the desiring aspect of the love, not its union. So there's always this sense of hopelessness in the genre. The hapless lover is engulfed in passionate flames of lust and desire that give him no rest or relief. The love he calls his chief throws him into despair. This sounds more like a hellish existence, since the despair he experiences is the result of a desire that can never be fulfilled, whereas heavenly desire for God ends in the soul attaining what it desires. In the end, the traditional courtly poetry of Michaud can be categorized as the or poetry like that can be, we could say, is kind of the poetics of the Inferno. But in the 13th and 14th centuries, there were gradual revolutions in the courtly love tradition that moved this genre away from being a poetics of lust to a more sublime theme. This movement constitutes a tradition from what Professor Teodolinda Barolini of Columbia University calls the love poetry to moral and ethical poetry. And key to this change is a perhaps lesser known individual by the name whom Dante draws from. His name is Gittone di Arezzo. His years are 1235 to 1294. A Tuscan poet and founder of the Tuscan Literary School. He had been a writer of the older Provençal style of courtly poetry, but his profound conversion in 1260, which was around the birth of Dante, the year of Dante's birth, inspired him to write about more noble subjects. Somehow writing about a lover's passionate love or lust for a woman he could never have, and thus leaving him in a hopeless state, would not do anymore. For Gittone, what Barolini calls a more, quote, bourgeois ethic comes into play. She explains this a little more fully here. She says, following his rejection of the troubadour equation between love and true worth, he exhorts us to pursue civic morality and virtuous moderation. Although he tells us, on the one hand, to reject carnal desire, which is what courtly love becomes when stripped of its sustaining ideology, he does not tell us, on the other hand, to embrace monastic contemplation. The Gittonian ideal is a life of measured toil and measured gain, leavened by the pursuit of wisdom and advancement of one's status and honor. An honored position in the community and a wisdom measured in terms of, in terms less metaphysical than practical and ethical. And I will read you here one of Gitone's poems. I apologize if I'm using this, using my device here. It is one of the books that I reference here. I'm actually referencing scholars from who have contributed to the Cambridge Companion to Dante, and lo and behold, I forgot to bring that my physical copy, but thanks to technology, I have an ebook version. So let me turn to that page here, where one of Gitone's. Okay, this is all right. Cooperate here. Technology, you can live with it. You can live without it. And even living with it, it's frustrating. But let me. Okay, here it is. This is the. This is Gitone d'Arezzo's poem called Ora Parra. That's the beginning. Now it will appear, he says, if I know how to sing, and if I am worth as much as I was accustomed to be worth, now that I completely flee love and do not want it, and more than anything else find it very hateful. I have heard it said by a man considered wise, that a man not pierced by love does not know how to write poetry and is worth nothing. But far from the truth, this seems to me. If there is concord between thought and word, for in all parts where love seizes, madness is king. You know that saying, love makes fools out of kings? In place of wisdom. Therefore, how can he have worth or please in any way at all, since from the maker of all worth he diverges, and to the contrary in every way he resembles? But he who wants to sing well and be worthy should place justice in his ship as pilot, and put honored wisdom at the helm, make God his star, and place his hope in true praise. For neither great honor nor great good have been acquired by following carnal desire, but by living as good men and abstaining from vice and from sin. Therefore, the wise man must be prepared at all times with all his heart and power to advance his state to honor, not shunning toil, since indeed riches do not give anyone repose, but rather distance it, and good striving brings honor as long as one pursues it with measure. So this is known as the stilo nuovo, the new style of poetry that Gitone spearheads. Let me see here. Make sure, yeah. And of course, its greatest representative is Guido Guinizelli, 1225 to 1276, who tries to equate earthly love and desire with heavenly love. Unlike Gitone, Guido Guinizelli does not spurn love, but rather he orients it to its proper place. For him, this is a step away from the tropes of courtly love tradition to make, and his goal is to make the lady an image of the divine, to make her beauty, so to speak, an image of divine beauty. He does this very subtly, and I will read more of this. Let's see. I'll read one of his poems. He says, "Lady, God will say to me, how did you presume when my soul will be in front of him? You passed through the heavens and came all the way to me, and you rendered me through the likeness of vain love. For to me belong the praises, and to the queen of the worthy kingdom, through whom all wickedness dies. I will be able to say to him, she had the semblance of an angel that was of your kingdom. It was no fault in me." The net result of the poem is to take the possibility of similitude between the lady and the divine much more seriously than it had been taken before, and to take her, quote, angelic qualities out of the realm of the amorous hyperbole and into the realm of bona fide theological speculation. So Dante seeks to unite these two themes in the Commedia. And I think its predecessor is, anybody read the La Vita Nuova? Right? If you're familiar with the Vita Nuova, that's on the new life. As back in the 90s, of course, some of the older one of my colleagues showed me a copy of La Vita Nuova and said, "We're living La Vita Nuova." We already get this orientation of turning the lady in the courtly love tradition into an image of the divine. So in the Vita Nuova and in the Commedia, we see this combination, this transformation. We see the civic virtues of Gittone di Arezzo because of Dante's concern for the body politic, and also the transformation of love in the courtly love tradition into an image of the divine, on the other, into one quest for God through the poet's lady love. And with this, he blends in one other genre, the epic poem, which he received from Virgil, and of course Virgil from Homer. In the Commedia, Purgatory will be the place where the redemption of poetry through faith will be accomplished. In Purgatorio, we get a hint of the general direction that Dante the poet wants to go in the restoration of love and poetry by the action of faith in Canto 1. We see the 4 stars illuminating Cato's face in Canto 1, 22 to 39. Those 4 stars represent, of course, the 4 cardinal virtues: justice, temperance, courage, and wisdom-prudence. By Canto 7, however, those stars give way to 3 stars, which represent the 3 theological virtues: faith, hope, and charity. Charity is the point of union with the beloved, imaged in Beatrice, but ultimately that image must give way to the object of faith and charity, God. In Purgatory, we see this upward movement once the 3 steps that lead to the mountain of anti-purgatory are ascended, which represent the 3 steps of repentance: confession, contrition, and satisfaction. At this point, we see three aforementioned stars make their appearance, while the four stars representing the cardinal virtues recede, it is not because they are destroyed, but because they give way to the three stars that stand for the theological virtues. And of course, for St. Thomas Aquinas, faith does not destroy reason, but perfects it. And of course, that applies in the order of grace. Grace does not supplant nature, but perfects it. Same thing with the virtues, right? The theological virtues perfect the cardinal virtues. In Purgatorio, we see the restoration also of human fellowship. Sordello da Goito, the Mantuan troubadour and knight who led a very rough life, at one point, while in the service of Count Riccardo di Bonifacio in Verona, where he abducts his master's wife, resulting in his flight from Provence. Some of my students say, so he pulled a Paris, if you know Homer, right? Homer, Paris basically abducting Menelaus' wife, Helen. So Sordello seems to be following in a very ancient tradition. But he enters into the service of Count Charles of Anjou. He was likely murdered, but Dante puts him in with those who repented at the last moment. In Dante's account, he is the troubadour who hates what Christendom has become and exhorts princes to act as true Christian princes and bring unity to a fractured people. Sordello strikes a contrast to the knight troubadour Bertrand de Born, who appears in Canto 27 and 28. He's the one who is basically holding his head, right? And since he caused he's in the hell of those that caused division and schism. I'll read one, and he seemed to have, in life, he seemed to have a very passionate love for battle, apparently for its own sake. Let me read to you this poem, which he called Lord of Ach and No. The beautiful spring delights me well when flowers and leaves are growing, and it pleases my heart to hear the swell of the bird's sweet chorus flowing in the echoing wood. And I loved, so it starts out in a very bucolic way, right? And I'd love to see all scattered around pavilions, tents, and martial ground, and my spirit finds it good to see on the level plains beyond gay knights and steeds caparisoned. It pleases me when the lancers' hold set men and armies flying, and it pleases me to hear around the voice of the soldiers crying, and joy is mine when the castles, strong besieged, shake and walls uprooted, totter and crack, and I see the foemen join on the moated shore, all compassed round with the palisade and guarded mound, lances and swords and stained helms, of course, stained with blood, and shields dismantled and broken on the verge of the bloody battle scene. The field of wrath betoken, and the vassals are there, and there fly the steeds of the dying and dead. And there the mingled strife is spread. The noblest warrior's care is to cleave the foeman's limbs and head, the conqueror less of the living than dead. I tell you that nothing my soul can cheer or banqueting or reposing like the onset of the cry, "Charge them!" rung from each side as in battle closing, where the horses neigh and the call to aid is echoing loud. Okay, it goes on, but you get the idea, right? There's a certain nobility in the military call, but we have to remember that it is a symbol of the fall, right? It is, men and humanity is supposed to be friends, but here we see somebody who kind of likes this too much, right? For the Americans, I think, who might have seen the film Apocalypse Now, there's Colonel Kilgore, and you know where I'm going. I love the smell of napalm in the morning, right? And that's Bertrand. That's Bertrand. Again, this is the poetics of hell. Here we see a man that loves battle for its own sake, delighting in it for no other end than itself. It is no wonder that Dante puts him in the hell of those who sow discord. His punishment mirrors his life. He must carry his severed head, experiencing in his own person the strife he fomented in the body politic when he took part in the revolts against Richard I of England and King Philip Augustus of France. In contrast, Sordello in Canto 8 embraces Virgil as a fellow Mantuan before he knows who he is and laments the sad divisions of the Italian city-states. He is aware that civil wars are the most unnatural of conflicts, since it divides a household. Conflicts at every level, from familiar to civic, to wars between Christian kingdoms and within the church, schisms are all unnatural, since they divide a body against itself. It is in purgatory that fellowship is restored. Through an act of faith, then, poetry is raised from the dead end of lust and the desire for violence, which rips apart the body politic and the church. But in this mix, we also must add the role of Virgil. In the Inferno, as we have seen, he is on more familiar ground. Having related his journey of his hero Aeneas through the underworld, he acts as the poet intellect that shows Dante, the pilgrim, the result of sin and vice, the loss of the good of reason, and at the lower levels, resulting from such loss, human speech, which is now reduced to so much gibberish. In Purgatory, Virgil is on less familiar ground, but through faith, though faith is needed to guide him, he still has Dante. He still has a role in explaining to Dante what must be done in light of this new situation. Professor Kevin Brownlee of the University of Pennsylvania explains it this way. He says, in Purgatory, an entirely different situation obtains with the status of both Virgil as character and of the Aeneid as text. First of all, this is new and uniquely Christian territory. Second, the purgatorial Virgil is portrayed from the outset as having no direct knowledge of the place, in striking contradistinction to the infernal Virgil's past experience of hell. The climax of his whole role comes as Virgil encourages Dante and the protagonist to cross through the fiery wall on the seventh terrace, Canto 27, thus completing the ascent. In the liminal space of the final step, Virgil explicitly announces the completion of his role as Dante's guide, affirming his own efficacy, while simultaneously articulating his geographic and spiritual limits. Virgil's final gesture as guide is therefore to crown and mitre Dante over himself. At this point, the student, Dante the pilgrim, has surpassed the teacher as poet, but with the teacher's help, as well as with the aid of divine grace, having infused the virtue of faith into Dante, the pilgrim. Every teacher hopes their students will surpass them, right? I think every professor here will agree with me on that. And it is surely a bittersweet joy for Virgil, as it is for any good teacher. In Canto 22, Statius, the Roman poet, relates to Virgil how instrumental he was in his own conversion through the reading of the fourth Eclogue. And many of you are familiar with the fourth Eclogue, right? This is Dante's, this is basically Virgil, this long Christian tradition of Virgil acting as a pre-Christian prophet, predicting the coming of a leader that would liberate his people from bondage. The poetry of Virgil was for him a guiding light which benefited him, but it did not benefit Virgil himself, since he was born before the coming of Christ. Having the virtue of faith, the Roman poet can pay his dues to the sublime teacher and dean of Roman poets. But at the same time, he can also go further than Virgil could. By the time Virgil crowns Dante in Canto 27, Dante no longer needs Virgil and can go farther in his own poetry and achieve a kind of, the poetics of paradise, even though paradise is the undiscovered country, right? It's hard to write about. But Dante gives it a good try. He himself says, what I saw, I cannot remember, but what I do remember, I will relate to you. And he does it in such beautiful poetic ways. Speech and poetry, then, are reclaimed in Purgatory by the new supernatural act of grace and faith perfecting nature and reason. In hell, speech is compromised. Even the souls who speak elegantly, as I said, deceive with words. We get the most hymns in Purgatory. It begins with in exitu, what is it? In exitu, I don't have to think. Yeah, Israel, yeah, exactly. And so we have a recovery of speech as Latin, French, Italian, and even Hebrew in the hymnody of the church all come together in a polyphony of sound. The Purgatory has has these hymns culled from the monastic hours and the liturgy of the Mass itself. The soul is purged of all that is not itself, refined, and along with the soul, poetry itself is awakened and refined through faith and reason. And that is the conclusion of my talk, or in the immortal words of my dear uncle, all right, anyway.